But you have also been very conservative when it comes to, gunning the big ticket acquisitions where we see the other Indian companies, other Indian groups doing. Why so?
Well, it depends on the relative size of both our group and our acquisition. So, for example, now in Godrej Consumer Products, we have a higher per capita FMCG sales in Indonesia, South Africa, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay than we do in India. Even in the UK, we have a higher per capita sale. So we have reasonable size and scale in those. Yes, I think there are a couple of groups which have made very large acquisitions, but those have been mainly in the developed world, where there are very large companies. We are clear that in the FMCG sector, the opportunities in the developing world are much higher, so we are sticking to the developing world.
All right, so as far as 2013 is concerned, this year are we going to see some big acquisitions? Are there some in the pipeline?
Well, I have to inform the stock exchange before I can inform you. But
I was trying my luck.
But certainly we are open to acquisitions and we are pursuing acquisitions.
The global stage, very few Indian brands have made it big. So do you expect that to change now?
Well, we are not expecting to take the Godrej brand, which is of course a very strong brand in India, necessarily internationally. When we have bought international companies, we have acquired some very strong brands in those geographies. So, for example, we have taken Indian products, Indian technologies into those countries, but marketed them in those strong brands in those geographies. Okay. Similarly, we brought some very interesting technologies and products from our international companies into India in the Godrej brand. So we will concentrate on brands which are strong in the concerned geographies.
The company's bill recently has made 2% CSR mandatory. Do you feel, you've been involved in a lot of philanthropic activities, be it education, be it wildlife. So, do you feel this mandatory CSR is one step closer to the corporates up in arms against the government once more?
I think it's very good for a country like India to have such a provision. And I think companies can leverage this CSR for the advantage not only of their own companies, but of the country as a whole. Now, if a 2% mandatory CSR does good both in the social sphere and in the economic sphere, for example, skilling and training can do a lot of good in the economic sphere, it will help India grow faster, companies will benefit. And this is the kind of expenditure, if done properly, and fortunately is being done by the private sector, it will be much more efficient.
Sure.
I think it can be a win-win. So the value you can add can be much more than the expenditure you have to commit to.
And doesn't it fit into the bigger picture of India at 75, where we want to see not just corporate growth, but moral growth as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think it fits into generally expanding win-win solutions for our country.
What are some of the initiatives that you would like the government or some of the initiatives that should happen to further strengthen the FMCG sector?
Leave it alone. I think most of our businesses, if left to business, will do extremely well. I don't think, obviously we need a government, we need regulatory action in certain parts of it, but I'm a great believer in free enterprise.
Sure.
I'm also a great believer in low rates of taxes, collecting more taxes and helping economic growth. I think free enterprise is extremely important. And I'm always reminded about a quotation from Winston Churchill, who said the disadvantage of capitalism is the unequal distribution of wealth. The disadvantage of socialism is the equal distribution of poverty.
At the risk of sounding pessimistic or maybe impatient, we have everything in place, but yet we are miles away from the tipping point where we can see things happening, quickly.
Clearly, we've gone through a phase where growth has slowed down. We've gone through a phase where there were global problems. I think we are unduly or excessively blaming the global problem for our problem.
So Godrej has recently entered into the infrastructure business. So in terms of low-cost housing or affordable housing, what is your take on this subject? And do you have any plans of venturing into this in the near future?
and our group, Godrej Properties, has gone into affordable housing in certain ways, and I think that's a huge growth possibility in the country, and we must realize the real estate is a sector which has very little imported inputs into it. All the value added is in India. So it is a great business to create value in the country, and I think affordable housing needs incentives and needs a push.
On one side we talk of the India growth story, on the other side our growth seems to be heading south. On one side government may be doing something, but apart from government, the private sector, the general public, especially the youth, can we do something about it? What is your advice to us?
Yeah, I don't think we should depend on the government. For example, I think Indian companies can pay a lot of attention to improve their performance internally. And of course, certain reforms only the government can implement. I am very optimistic because there is a legislation pending, unfortunately it's taken far too long, called the Goods and Services Tax. That one indirect tax reform will add, in my opinion, 2 percentage points to our GDP growth, other things being equal. It's a very important reform which, when implemented, could become a basis of a win-win regaining of an 8 to 10% growth rate. There are many other things that could be done in the country, but yes, you are right. Business itself could concentrate internally on efficiency improvements, which, other things being equal, can help each business grow a little better, and that would add again to GDP growth. So I think we need to use all resources at our command to encourage growth and to accelerate.
Sure, Mr. Godrej. Now, before I let you go, my final question. At the risk of sounding pessimistic or maybe impatient, we have everything in place, from vision statements, policy papers, technology, manpower, everything. But yet we are miles away from the tipping point where we can see things happening, quickly. So what is your view on that? Why is that?
Clearly, we've gone through a phase where growth has slowed down. We've gone through a phase where there were global problems. I think we are unduly or excessively blaming the global problems for our problems. We could have resolved things better. I think one of the big problems in India is that when things go well, we do not concentrate on improvements. We think things are going well and we let things go. That's the time where good improvement reforms can be brought in. They're accepted much more easily. Even in companies, I have seen companies, even in our group, I have that problem, that when things are well, we don't work on improvements. You can do as much improvements when things are well as when things are not well.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Godrej. It was a pleasure
Very nice
talking to you.
talking to you.
Thank you.